Okay, so we are ready to resume. Okay, so this is the class on Monday, September 4th, the morning, the second class starting at 10:30 p.m. a.m. Okay, so now we've gone through the types of consciousness rooted in greed and hatred, and now there are two that are rooted in exclusively in delusion without any admixture of greed and hatred. So the first of these is said to be that which is associated with, Jnanamoli is translated as uncertainty. This is vichikicha, which I would prefer to translate simply as doubt. And this is not what I would call inquisitive doubt or investigative doubt, but this is the skeptical doubt, the doubt of hesitation. And what's interesting in the doubting consciousness, in the other types of consciousness, even the greed and hating consciousness, the mental factor of mental one-pointedness is called samadhi. Even though, of course, as I explained, it's not the meditative samadhi. But in the doubting consciousness, because doubt is a state of vacillation or uncertainty, not being able to make up one's mind. So the factor of samadhi, or the factor of one-pointedness, is not described as concentration or samadhi, but instead the expression is used, I think, as cittassa titi, which is here translated the steadiness of consciousness. So it's just the fact that consciousness stands for that moment and that it focuses on its object. But it's because the mind is divided or wavering or vacillating, so it's not able to bring forward that degree of mental focus to earn the title or designation samadhi. Okay, all the other mental factors are the same. And again, I find it a bit strange how one could say somebody is in a state of doubt, can't make up my mind, especially this is religious doubt, whether the Buddha is enlightened or not, whether the Dhamma is true or not. I don't see how one could say that there's lack of a sense of moral shame, lack of moral dread in that state of consciousness. But that's the way the elders compiled the text. So the new factor here is doubt or uncertainty. Yeah, it's citta titi is the steadiness of consciousness. And it said that this is weak concentration occurring in mere steadiness in occurrence. Okay, then the word doubt, there's a little word play here that the word chikicha in Pali has the meaning of a cure, the cure of an illness. And then vi is taken to be vigata, which means disappeared or gone. And so it's said to be without a wish to cure. Thus it is vichikicha, thus it is uncertainty. It has the characteristic of doubt. A different Pali word is used, sangsaya, which I would render sangsaya, uncertainty, and vichikicha is doubt. Its function is to waver, to vacillate, and it is manifested as indecisiveness, or manifested as taking sides. Meaning is not clear. Okay, then the other mental factor which is present here which I think has not been explained yet, is udacha, which is, oh, I see. So this is now, we have the two types of consciousness rooted in strong delusion. One is the doubting consciousness, and the other is called the restless consciousness. So this is a state of consciousness, a state of mind, in which restlessness is predominant. And so there's no other unwholesome roots present, no greed, no hatred, and none of their affiliates. But this is a mind which is really in the grip of strong agitation. So this state of mind has the same mental factors as the doubting consciousness, except that in this state of consciousness, there's no doubt, no uncertainty. It's just sheer agitation. Somehow it says, with the absence of uncertainty, resolution or decision arises here. Again, I don't see what function that could perform, but it's said to be present. And it's said that the concentration is stronger because of the presence of resolution. Again, I find that a bit puzzling. I would think in a restless consciousness also, the degree of one-pointedness would be so weak that it couldn't be called concentration. But the main point is that the agitation is here, the agitation or restlessness here has been unleashed from anything else that's binding it down, and it just completely dominates and governs the functioning of the mind. Okay, the rest of this section just explains the mental factors that are present in the functional states of consciousness. And I don't think that's especially, we should go into that here. Unless, do you want to go into that? I don't think that's really necessary. You could look at it on your own, and I have to say it's explained more clearly in the comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma. And in my explanatory guide to the sections in that book, I used fairly normal English, whereas the Visuddhimagga is translated I have to say very accurately from the Pali, a little too accurately, so that it preserves that rigid scholastic style of the Pali commentators. What I thought was interesting, last night, Venerable Sudaso raised the question about, in broad outlines, the relationship between the Pali or Theravada Abhidharma and the Sarvastivada Abhidharma. So last night I took from my bookshelf with dusting it off, that 600-page volume by Venerable Kuala Lumpur Dhamma-jyoti, the book called the Sarvastivada Abhidharma. And just out of curiosity, I sort of just opened it up, and I happened to turn to a page that listed the dharmas, the factors of existence, the mental and material factors in the Sarvastivada Abhidharma system. And it presents an extremely interesting contrast to the Theravada system. There are some interesting similarities, but also interesting and quite significant differences. So should we take a look at this? It's only, well, a little more than 2 pages, not 600 pages. Okay, so the Sarvastivada Abhidharma has 75 dharmas or states of phenomena. So under rupa or material form, it just has 11 as compared to the Pali has 28. So what it has are the five sense faculties. So eye, ear, nose, tongue, body faculties. Then it has the five corresponding objects, visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, and tangible object. I didn't look this up, but probably in the tangible object, it will explain this as the four primary elements. So the four primary elements of matter would be included under the tangible object. And then as the 11th, this is for us, it's a rather strange addition. It's called something avijñapti rupa, which he translates as non-informative matter. And I remember years ago hearing the explanation of this, that it said that when one undertakes precepts, a particular kind of rupa or material form gets imprinted in one's body. And so that is the non-informative matter. Okay, so that is material form. Then it has chitta, or mind, and I don't see any divisions here or classifications, and I don't think the Savastivada Abhidharma goes into an elaborate distinction of the various types of chittas the way the Pali Abhidharma does. Do you know the Savastivada Abhidharma? Okay. Then we come to the Chaitasikas. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. So they have the Chaitasikas, which are considered universals. So presumably these will be present in every chitta, every state of mind. So where we have agreement with the Pali Abhidhamma, we have feeling, volition, perception, contact, and manasikara. This is attention, and it has samadhi, concentration. This corresponds to our one-pointedness of mind. Okay, so those are common with the Theravada Abhidharma. Then some differences. It has, surprise, surprise, prajna, or understanding, as a universal mental factor. So that's, for us, it's very puzzling. And it has smriti, or this is our sati, mindfulness, as a universal mental factor. And I think the Savastivada Abhidharma treats sati largely in terms of its original meaning of memory. So probably they're thinking that in every state of consciousness there's some memory of what has taken place in the past. And so sati must be present in every state. Okay, some of the, under the wholesome, it has wholesome mahabhumikas. So this is translated here as the skillful universal factors. So that includes faith. It has hiri. He translates that as modesty. This is what I call moral shame. Others call conscience. And it has otapa, which he translates that as shame. This is what I translate as moral dread. Then it has non-greed, non-hatred. Then it has, as a universal skillful factor, virya, or energy. Whereas in the Pali system, energy can be present both wholesome, unwholesome, and functional or indeterminate chittas. But here, energy is given as a universal wholesome factor. And then it has harmlessness, which is actually, harmlessness is mentioned in the Pali Suttas as one of the three kinds of right thought. So we have the right thought of renunciation, the right thought of goodwill, and then the third right thought is the right thought of harmlessness. But strangely, harmlessness is not mentioned in the Pali Abhidharma. Probably it was considered that it's implied by non-hatred. But the Savastivadins must have thought that harmlessness is significant enough in itself to deserve the status of a distinct mental factor. Okay, then it has the unwholesome mental states distinguished. It has universal defilements. I guess defilements that are present in every unwholesome or defiled mental state. So this would include moha, delusion, asada, the lack of faith. Then it has tina, this is our dullness or sloth, restlessness, laziness, which is not a separate mental factor in the Theravada Abhidharma, and is given as a universal defilement, laziness. Okay, then some of the secondary universal dharmas of defilement. It mentions anger and enmity as two. They're not included separately in the Theravada Abhidharma. Probably they would be considered expressions or manifestations of hatred, but here they're included as separate mental factors. So then we have something called satya, which would be, he translates that as dissimulation, or we could say deceitfulness. And then they have envy, one called, and then miserliness. So those agree with the Theravada Abhidharma. Mada, pride, vihingsa, harmfulness. So both harmfulness and non-harmfulness are given as separate mental factors. And then some of the indeterminate dharmas, strangely greed, and then patiga, which is aversion or hostility, are given as indeterminate or unfixed, unwholesome, unfixed dharmas. And in the same category we have conceit and doubt, but then we also have applied thought and sustained thought put in the same category with greed, aversion, conceit, and doubt. Sometimes when I look at this, maybe my thinking is too much framed by my acquaintance with the Theravada Abhidharma, so I feel a little bit like I've gone into Alice's Wonderland. Okay, then they have something, a class that we have no counterpart to in the Theravada Abhidharma. These are called the Chitta Viprayukta Sanskara, which is translated as, we could say, the formations disconnected from mind. And this includes some things I don't really know the meaning of them. Acquisition and non-acquisition, group homogeneity, how do you pronounce? Homogeneity? Excuse me, English is becoming my second language. Homogeneity. Things being homogeneous. Ideationless. Then and then what comes next is the non-percipient meditative attainment, the meditative attainment of cessation, the life faculty. So in the Theravada, we have two types of life faculty, the material life faculty, mental life faculty. In the Sarvastivada, the life faculty is disconnected from mind, but it's not put under matter. Then this is interesting that we have these same four that we meet in the Rupa Kanda of the Theravada Abhidharma, that is production, then continuation, continuity, and then aging or deterioration, decay, and then finally impermanence. And then also in this category we have words, then separately phrases, then separately syllables, and then we have three unconditioned dharmas. One of them is space, which in the Pali Abhidharma is included in the aggregate of material form, and it's considered just the empty space between material bodies. Whereas I think in the Sarvastivada Abhidharma, space is considered to be the universal, all-embracing container of everything. And then we have something called cessation through deliberation and cessation independent of deliberation. What's exactly meant by those, I don't know. And that's it. Okay, maybe we should use the rest of this period. We could take questions based on the presentation of the mental formations. Again, I have to lay out the rules for asking questions. Okay, you stand up. You can say your name, particularly if you haven't asked the question before. Speak directly into the microphone. The question should be clear and concise, and the question should pertain to the subject matter. Like, don't ask me questions about quantum mechanics. I'm not a physicist. Or about my opinion about achieving peace in the Middle East. I am not a specialist in that area.
I'm Lucille.
Lucille.
My
okay.
question is greed always unwholesome? I'm thinking of an example like if you need to conserve your energy and you don't want to speak with someone or give them time or something,
Yeah.
and you have to keep it for yourself, that's from greed, but it's not necessarily like unwholesome in my view. Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't consider that greed.
But it's like you're holding it in, you're not giving, you're not sharing, I need this.
Maybe one would say that perhaps one could take that as a manifestation of what's called miserliness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if one doesn't want to share one's ideas with things with people, maybe that would be miserliness. But if one is, say, not speaking because one wants to conserve one's energy for some other purposes, I wouldn't call that either greed or miserliness.
Okay.
I just don't know how to analyze it in Abhidharmic terms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But I don't think it's an unwholesome form of greed.
Hi, Bhante. I'm Dina.
Yeah.
You talked about envy,
Yeah.
but only as a form of hate, right?
I didn't say it's a form of hate. I said that envy is seen as rooted in hatred because it involves an element of resentment.
But what about the aspect of, I'm trying to think of the right expression, but envy in terms of wanting more. I see you have a computer and I wish I had a computer. I don't hate you. I'm sort of just envying that you have a Dell computer and I just have a crummy HP. It's not about hate, it's about jealousy. Do you understand my question?
No.
I'm wondering in this,
If you want
is
the computer,
envy only seen as hate?
If you want this computer, I'll give it to you.
No, I really want an HP.
You want
No,
an
I want
HP?
an Apple.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't quite understand your
Well,
question.
I mean, you're only looking at envy in one light when it has other aspects, I think, but maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong. And that is more about jealousy, not hate.
Actually, that is a good point. I'm not sure whether you brought that up intentionally, but there seems to me to be a distinction between jealousy and envy, a really very distinct psychological difference, which I think in the Pali language and in the Pali Abhidhamma system, there's only the one word, isa, which is what we translate as envy. But I see a real significant psychological difference between the English words envy and jealousy. Like envy relates particularly to the possessions, success, or good fortune of others, whereas jealousy is a factor that operates mainly in human relationships, where, okay, I'm in love with a girl, and I want her for myself, and we're at a dance, and I go to dance with her, and when I dance with her, she's rather indifferent towards me, and then the handsome young guy comes with the slick hair and a beautiful smile, and he dances with her, and I see her eyes are lighting up, and she's smiling, and they're chatting, and then that is jealousy. Maybe I'm envious of the other guy's good looks and his social skills, but it's because the girl that I like is fascinated by him, and with me, she's, we're having nice weather today, aren't we? Yeah. What do you think about the Yankees game? Yankees? I never follow them. With the other guy, oh. So that's jealousy.
As distinct from envy.
Excuse me?
So envy does not have that aspect in the Abhidhamma. It's just about hatred, not about jealousy.
It's not about hatred. I said it arises in the states of consciousness rooted in hatred because there's this element of resentment, but it's always expressed as being envious of the success or good fortune of others, whereas jealousy, it has a different psychological nuance.
Thank you.
Okay, is that Ravi?
Bande, this is a slightly general question. I heard the word Sravastivada many times in the...
Sarvastivada.
Yeah. Now, I am a little unaware of, I know we hear of Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of followers of this? And is this coming from the time of the Buddha?
Sarvastivada.
In the world, I'm saying today, in today's world.
Sarvastivada.
So, yes, Bande. Because I haven't heard of anyone who says I'm...
I think there have not been Sarvastivada since about the 10th century. Maybe someplace in the Himalayas, there might be some Sarvastivada monks who developed the iddhi of preserving their long lifespan and who went into a deep samadhi so that they could preserve their body from about the 8th century up to the present. If there are no such monks in the Himalayas, we could say that today there are no Sarvastivadins.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
So,
but you see, first, in the Buddha's time, there were no schools of Buddhism. There was
Right.
just Buddha Dharma.
Dhamma, yes.
Okay, then Buddhism spread to different geographical regions, and in the different geographical regions, the monks developed, as they explored the Dharma, they developed different ways of commenting on it and different ways of analyzing it and giving some kind of systematic form to it. And from this, the different schools emerged. This is all in the period before the rise of Mahayana Buddhism.
Right.
And so we had in one region the Vibhajyavada, the school that emphasized analytical distinctions. Another region, the Savastivada, another region, the Mahasangika, another region, Kasapya, the Hemavatas, Pugalavadans. They each also developed their own, sometimes distinctive tenets. And for all of those schools eventually disappeared, except the branch of the Vibhajyavadins moved south and came eventually to Sri Lanka and then flourished, and now it's came to be called the Theravada. So that is the only school from these early schools that actually survived. But the texts of the Savastivada school, because the Savastivada school flourished in the northwest in Kashmir, and so the texts were brought over the Silk Road to China and translated, a lot of them translated into Chinese, and some came from India to Tibet, particularly the Abhidharma Kosha and some of the philosophical treatises translated into Tibetan. And so they're preserved in Chinese translation and Tibetan, some in Tibetan translation. And so today, like when Tibetan monks learn the Abhidharma, what they study is the Abhidharma Kosha, which is a kind of summary of the Savastivada Abhidharma. And in China, centuries ago, the Savastivada Abhidharma was extensively studied. Over time, interest in it was lost, but now there's been a kind of revival in recent years in the study of the Savastivada Abhidharma.
Thank you, Vadi. Is there a major difference between the Theravada Abhidhamma and the Savastivada? Major difference, or is it very similar?
As I said last night, I haven't studied the Savastivada Abhidharma in any detail.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
But there are, as you could see from this list of
Yeah.
mental factors, that there are particular specific
Thank you,
differences.
Bhante.
Okay, Giovanna. How's
Hello.
my Italian?
Yeah.
Giovanna.
Pretty good. Bante had a question on, actually, I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate between the difference between delusion and wrong view, because I don't understand how, I understand how wrong view is associated with greed, and I understand why you were also saying how hatred is associated with
Yeah.
wrong view, even though the Abhidhamma doesn't mention that.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why delusion, like wrong view is not associated with delusion.
Why wrong view is not associated with delusion?
Yeah, like it's not mentioned. It doesn't,
Okay.
I think I'm not really understanding that.
But the point I have to emphasize is that wrong view is in fact associated with delusion, because the consciousness that's rooted in greed also has delusion as its root. So the states of consciousness with greed have delusion as a root. So they have two roots actually, greed and delusion. But it's just because greed is the differentiating factor. So it's said that they are greed-rooted. But actually, they're rooted in both greed and delusion. And similarly, the consciousness, the so-called hating consciousnesses, they're rooted in hatred, but also they're rooted in delusion. So delusion is common to all of the greed chittas and the two hatred chittas. But it's just that there are two kinds of chittas in which there's neither greed nor hatred. And so in those two, delusion comes to the forefront or becomes more prominent because it's not hidden behind greed and behind hatred. And so that is the doubting consciousness and the restless or agitated consciousness. Does that make it clear?
Better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Mano?
Thank you, Bhante. I wanted to ask a question on kukucha.
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 Yeah.
I think you described as regret.
Yeah.
I think the way you're describing it, regret about what you may have done to somebody else and thinking back, does that also include regret that does not involve someone else? Maybe you did something just for your own personal benefit that in hindsight, when you think back, you wish you could have done something differently. That regret that is maybe purely internal, and how does that link up to hatred?
Yeah, it includes, kukucha would include that kind of regret as well. The regret when you might have done something better in the past, but you failed to do it, or you did something wrong in the past, and now you're looking back and regretting it, even though it doesn't involve another person. So the main point here, you see, I think the reason why kukucha, or regret, is included amongst the unwholesome factors is that in the sutta teaching, it's one of the five, it's included amongst the 5 hindrances. And so since it's a hindrance, it's an unwholesome mental factor. And sort of the prominent quality of kukucha, as I said earlier, it's this kind of scratching on the mind. So it causes this continual disturbance in the mind, which prevents the mind from becoming suffused with joy and with a wholesome joy, and from becoming uplifted and becoming steady in its focus.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. So it's not that there's actually hatred there in the sense that one is hating somebody, but it's just that there is this a kind of mild undercurrent of displeasure or dislike because of what one has either done or failed to do.
Thank you.
Is that Suki? Okay.
Hi, it's Suki.
Yeah.
When you hear a really, really funny story, and then you just laugh, really, and just pure good laugh.
Yeah.
Where does it belong? Is it like a wholesome kind of? Is it leading to wholesome karma, or where is it leading to, or is it nothing? From like yesterday, I had a really funny story from my friend here.
Yeah.
And just brought me such a wonderful laugh, and I felt so good for a long time. And it just made me wonder, is it like a wholesome kind? Is it, leading to wholesome karma, or is it just nothing?
I think it said, it's said in the Abhidharma system. Let's see if I could remember correctly. There are certain chittas, certain kinds of consciousness that are responsible for laughter, and they include, I think it would be the 4 types of consciousness rooted in greed and associated with joy. So when there's laughter over something that's unwholesome, then the 4 kinds of consciousness, 4 kinds of sense sphere consciousness accompanied by joy when one is laughing in a wholesome way. So those are 8. And then there is that rather puzzling arahat smiling consciousness, which maybe it's not a laughter, but it's just a smile. So I think those maybe are the 9 kinds of consciousness which are said to be the underlying the kinds of citta that underlie laughter or that manifest as laughter.
Thank you.
Is that the...
Sure. Yes.
Okay, Tushari and... Is that Malind? Okay.
Hi. I have a question
Let me stand
about
up, then I could see the people better. Okay.
the intention.
Yeah.
Is part of the Buddhist discourse, like as growing up as a Buddhist, and I was told even if you don't intend to kill and you walk on like grass and you kill a bug or
Yeah.
an insect, intention is a determining factor whether it's becoming unwholesome or wholesome. And I'm just wondering if that comes up in this discussion of like, I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know whether it has been discussed in the text at all, of the intention, element of the intention of doing an activity, whether it's intentionally done or not, or
Yeah.
whether,
So I don't quite understand what the question is.
It's the question, like, so you're not intentionally trying to be harmful,
Yeah.
but your thoughts are such. So does that change it, like, anyway, or is it?
You mean, are you asking, is intention essential for the creation of karma?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When, in fact, the Buddha says, Chaitanahang bhikkhave kamang vadami, he says that it is intention that I call karma. So if there's no intention, if one performs some action, but there's no intention motivating that action, then there's no creation of the corresponding type of karma. So to take the example that you gave, one is walking down this path, and there are little insects there, and one doesn't see them, and one steps on them. Certainly one is not creating the karma of killing.
So in the same way, if someone is born with anxiety and, it's in your genes, they always say it's in your genes, so you carry these things from the belly of your mother, but are you responsible for these mental factors that you're carrying?
I would say probably, what a person has a lot of anxiety, probably that anxiety is a residue of experiences in a previous existence, which the memory impression is there, sort of imprinted on the stream of consciousness, but far below the threshold of recognition. And so that maybe some traumatic experience from a previous life, or even, well, you're saying from birth. Okay, so from a previous life, some traumatic experiences. So the vasanas, these mental impressions are there, but they're just below the surface, and so they manifest in the form of a kind of what seems to be a kind of inherent or innate disposition towards anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way I would understand it.
All right. Can I also ask another question?
Yeah.
About frequency of the
Put
thought.
Put the microphone close.
A frequency.
Yeah.
Is there anything about the frequency? How often you get angry? How often you feel the greed? Is there a relevance? Is there any correlation between how you accumulate karma? Like, suppose you get angry like once a month versus not like every day. Like, I'm just looking at frequency of the thought. Does that impact on your karma as well?
Well, I would say that, each occasion of being angry will generate negative karma, and probably anger develops a cumulative force. So a person who gets angry frequently will be disposed to have stronger, fiercer, more destructive anger than somebody who gets angry occasionally. This is my guess. Though also it's possible if somebody forcefully restrains their anger so that they don't manifest the anger often, but then something happens that really ignites them, and then the anger might explode. Actually, there's an interesting sutta in this respect. It's in, I think, the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours. The Buddha says that there are these four kinds of people in the world who are comparable to a viper, to different kinds of vipers. So there's the viper, let me see if I could remember it. Well, I don't, on the spot I'm not able to remember the details. Oh, but I could remember the four kinds of people. Okay, there's the person who doesn't get angry, the person who gets angry easily, and his anger is destructive. There's the person who gets angry easily, but his anger is not destructive. There's the person who does not get angry easily, but when he gets angry, his anger is destructive. And the person who doesn't get angry easily, and when he gets angry, his anger is not destructive. Something like that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Tsering. Oh, I said Melinda goes first, then Tsering.
I think Bhante is Milind. I think I found the answer. My question was, if somebody is trying to do good, let's say I want to help 3 students, but I want to surpass my expectations saying 5 students, this is not being greedy. Is this being greedy? I think it's not.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, but in fact I don't think so. But let me just say something that maybe will clear away a lot of questions. I don't regard the Abhidhamma system as being a completely adequate, completely adequate, fully complete explanation of all kinds of psychological experiences that people undergo. And I don't think it was originally intended in that way, even though when we look at it, we tend to think we can explain every aspect of human experience by the framework of the Abhidhamma. And maybe people are now taking it in that way. We have to remember the Abhidhamma first was formulated by monks in ancient times based on trying to systematize the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha were laid down for the specific purpose of cultivating the path that leads to liberation, going through the stages of moral development, training the mind, dealing with the obstacles of the mind, learning how to collect and concentrate the mind, then to develop the wisdom or insight into the nature of phenomena. And so the teachers, ancient teachers who compiled the Abhidhamma, were formulating it within that framework of the aim of the Buddha's teaching. And so what they're dealing with here are the kinds of mental states that are obstructive to development within that specific context of the practice of sila, samadhi, and panya, and the particular mental factors conducive to development, those factors that constitute the higher levels of development. Yeah, so we could start thinking of so many different aspects of human experience and say, how does that fit into the Abhidhamma? And I just have to raise the question myself, does it? I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Tsering had the question.
Bhante, my question is about contact. How does contact fit in here in this mental formation? Because contact, as far as I understand, is the meeting of the senses with the objects.
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, so in the suttas, contact is not expressly assigned to any of the aggregates any of the 5 aggregates. So it's just said, when explaining the aggregates, like what is the condition for feeling, perception, the volitional formations, and then the answer is contact is the condition. So feeling arises from contact. Perception arises from contact. Perception, and the chaitana, volition, arises from contact. So when the compilers of the Abhidharma then were trying to lay out the scheme of when they laid out the scheme of the 5 aggregates, of course, all of the material phenomena they will put in the aggregate of material form. Naturally, all kinds of feeling will go in the aggregate of feeling. There's a convenient place for all kinds of perception, go in the aggregate of perception. Any kind of consciousness goes in the aggregate of consciousness. But we have here the aggregate of mental formations, and it has been defined only as the 6 kinds of volition. And yet there are many other mental factors mentioned in the suttas. And so they would have faced the question, where do we put these mental factors in terms of the 5 aggregates? They're mental, so they don't go in material form. They're not feeling, they're not reducible to pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling. They're not perception, they're not consciousness, though they accompany consciousness. So the natural place for them is the aggregate of mental formations.
Thank you, Bhante.
So I was saying the natural place for them is the aggregate of mental formations, and then one of these factors that's mentioned in the suttas with the very prominent role is contact. So they had to figure out, where does contact go? It's the condition for feeling, perception, and volition, and so the only place for it is the aggregate of mental formations. Without contact?
Without the contact,
Yeah.
then a lot of these so-called emotions or consciousness cannot arise without the contact.
Everything has to arise through the contact of consciousness with its object.
Right, Bhante. Bhante, the next question would be, if I can ask,
Okay.
we have studied more or less on what are these 5 aggregates and so on. Is there also something like, are we going to talk about how to be liberated from those?
How to be liberated
Yes.
from the 5 aggregates?
Yes.
That's a big question, so why don't you save that for the afternoon and ask it again in the afternoon, because it's now 11:20 and we have to adjourn for the lunch again, unless we want to skip the lunch and deal with the question. Then we'd really be liberated from the 5 aggregates. Second time. It seems this thing is going off on its own. It's not running on battery, it should be plugged in. Because I'm sure I didn't turn it off. In fact, I recall when I was doing the countdown, when I came to 0, I recall pressing it. I didn't think so. We do have it on this. Okay. Okay, so let us conclude for the morning. And then the afternoon session, no more lecturing by me. We just have questions this is from, I think it's 2:10, 2:10 till 3:10. So you have like a full hour session for questions. Okay, so